Today, I want to talk about my adventure in learning how to paint for the first time. Over the past week, I decided to try my hand at painting miniatures, setting out on a 2-day slog to paint all of the HeroQuest furniture in the base game. This video is going to explain what I've learned throughout the process, some mistakes I made, and what things I would go about changing for my next session. If you're just starting out on painting miniatures or are an experienced painter, stick around, as I would love to get your feedback and encourage anyone who hasn't picked up a paintbrush to give it a go. This is the Fair Weatherman. Welcome, my friends, to the world of HeroQuest, a place unlike any other. I'm the Fair Weatherman, and welcome to my HeroQuest channel, as we do a deep dive in the dungeons of HeroQuest and all it has to offer for those who are interested in beefing up their thematic gameplay and growing their love for this hobby. If you're apprehensive like me and nervous about picking up a paintbrush for the first time, I'm going to talk about how you can take the furniture in your base game system and give it an upgrade, creating a deeper thematic experience the next time you play. So here are the paints that I decided to pick up on Amazon. The Vallejo Game Color set. I like this set because it did come with a nice variety of paint colors. I know the Army Painter has a really nice set that I was looking at too. It did come with metallics and a wash and a figure to practice on, but I ended up going with Vallejo because I felt like there was a more variety of colors. I don't regret my purchase, although I would like to try the Army Painter set as well, maybe even the speed paints. I ended up going just to Home Depot and getting some Rust-Oleum primer. It worked. I'm not sure if maybe getting a model brand would be better in the future. I did notice after I sprayed them up that they were kind of sticky. And so one of the downfalls that I had was not putting the figures on a base and handling them as I was painting. I did notice that some of the primer was rubbing off on my fingers. The first mistake that I noticed I had made. I did grab my palette and spray it up with the primer so that as I was mixing colors, I can see exactly what they would look like on the figure. This is a tip that I saw on one of the painting videos that I had watched before I started. Here's the varnish that I had bought. I did debate about getting one that was a spray-on, assuming it would have been an easier application, but I found that this one worked just fine. As long as you apply a thin coat, I felt it left a really nice finish. Here are the brushes I purchased on Amazon. It was a really nice, cheap introductory set to painting. I didn't get around to using all of them in my first session, but I do feel like you get a really wide range of different brush sizes. Certain brushes used for dry brushing, certain brushes used for detailing. This one right here came in handy in painting all of those intricate books on the bookshelf. Something that took quite a lot of time, but was well worth it in the end. To prep my models, I took the furniture and scrubbed them with a toothbrush and some warm water. Just getting rid of any residue from fingerprints, also removing any of the excess solution that was left on the molds. The inspiration that I decided to go with was based off of the 1989 HeroQuest original set, and I really wanted to try to mimic the furniture coloring that we got in the printed cardboard, but then I had to come up with how I wanted certain pieces that were just brown or gray, and I was left to use my imagination on those. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the furniture pieces that I had painted and discuss the areas that I struggled with in painting those specific pieces. So one thing I did is I tried to use the same colors throughout to keep the same color scheme. So as you can see on the tomb, I used the same kind of reddish purple color that I then used on the top of the Alchemist Bench. I used as the bookmark on the Sorcerer's table, and then I used above every door. I felt like this was a really good way to tie in all of the same colors throughout. To start were the doors. I did debate on how much detail I was willing to give these doors. I noticed that there is a vine that runs up both sides of them. This did become exhausting after a while, going through all the doors and painting this vine, but I do feel like it was a great outcome in the end. I did spend a little bit of time on the pavers. I cut out some cardboard and glued them down on the base of the doors first before I primed them. And I really wasn't sure how this was going to turn out. After giving it a wash at the very end, I thought it did add quite a bit to the doors. One of the areas I struggled with was in my highlighting. After I had completed the paint originally, I went back through and used a white highlight, and I realized I probably should have used a gray or something that wasn't so bright. It was a bone white color, but still it ended up being too bright up here, I feel. And then also when I applied the varnish, it was really difficult to apply a thin coat without it pooling in the little eyes of the skull right here. So I did feel like in some of the doors, I did get kind of a clear buildup from the varnish right there where it would pool. Another area I struggled with the door was when holding them to paint. I should have put some putty on the bottom of the door and stuck it on like a shot glass. And so what I noticed over time, the primer was kind of rubbing off here on the bottoms. And so I made sure to go back and cover it with acrylic and then put a good varnish on the bottom there. Here are my chests. I did like that I did some variation between the front and the sides of each chest to imagine maybe there was multiple types of wood being used to build the chest. And so I did that. I also took one and made it a little bit lighter of a brown color just to add some variation. I did like the gold and how it turned out on the locks. Like I said, I didn't necessarily have a pre-made wash in my set of Vallejo paints, so I just mixed a brown and a black together and really diluted it with water and ran that over at the very end to give it a nice weathered look. Here are the tables I came up with. I had glued these skulls down when I first got my HeroQuest set, and so I really liked that there was a bit of decoration on the tables. I did see on Midwinter Minis that he had printed off a map, a HeroQuest map, a mini one, and glued it down on the table, which I might end up doing still. I think that was a really cool thing to include. But I wanted these tables to look very simplistic. But I do like the detail that the wash did bring out in the tabletops. Here are my bookcases. I really was going for that two-toned wood look where it was darker on top like the original base game and lighter on the sides. My downfall was I had mixed up a custom brown. I didn't use the one that came right out of the bottle. And so as I had to do touch-ups, I could not get that exact replica of that brown. And so you can kind of see in certain areas where it didn't quite line up and match just right. The most difficult aspect was painting all of the books. I did my best to mimic the original print and provide some differentiation between each book, but after a while I just went with brown and added some gold up top just to kind of break up the books and make it look like there was a really nice printed ink on the books. I had glued down the skull here and here prior when I first got my set, and so I had to go in there and make sure that I detailed those skulls as well. I do like how painting the very back of the bookshelf black really allowed the books to pop out. All right, here's my rack, which I'm really pleased with. I did my best to make it gray and brown on top, just like the original. I had glued down the skull prior as well. I really like that detail. In the original game, you got a bunch of skulls and rats, and so you could easily pop them in on the bookshelves and on the tops of the tables. And so I tried to mimic that by gluing them down on some of the furniture. I had added some green, kind of mossy color throughout the brick to make it look like it was in a wet dungeon over a long period of time. And then I tried to stick with just different variations of brown and black. I like the way this one turned out. All right, with the tomb, I used the same idea of that moss green throughout the weathered stone. And so I did my best just to really try to put some wash inside the recesses here to pull out all of that intricate details. I tried to add some vines here. And then up top, I really wanted to make this knight stick out by adding some of that reddish purple color that I added throughout my furniture. adding some accents of metallic gold on top. And then of course on the inside I had glued down a fallen soldier. I do like the way that this tomb came out in the end. All right, the Sorcerer's table. The different color tone from the brown wood to the stone was something that I intentionally decided on to match the original game. And then I really wanted to try to make it look like the candles were glowing on the table. So I had used a little bit of yellow and some gold at the end to just bring up on these edges here, like the light might be touching some of these higher tops of the table. If I were to do it again, I probably would spend more time on the book and maybe draw a cool icon or logo here. As you can tell, I didn't use a small enough brush initially, and it got a little bit too thick in some areas, but I'm happy with it. Here's my throne. I made a point to keep it consistent with the color tones of the original throne. You know, we got that really cool printed cardboard that gave us some color, and I wanted to mimic that. So I used a lot of brown and golds and yellow to highlight, and then really worked hard on this back part with the washed recesses of the fabric. You know, when you paint these figures, you really start to see the intricate details of the sculpt. When it was all brown, I didn't notice that there are like little angel figures here, their heads built into the throne as well as the bottom here. And as I started to paint and put a little wash in there, all that detail came out. And I thought, this is really fantastic. I liked in the original that there was a splash of color amongst the furniture. Here's my Alchemist Bench. I really spent a lot of time detailing out the papers on the top of the table. I added a little bit of gold coins in the drawer. I did struggle with this one. Holding this piece over time did wear off some of the primer that I had sprayed on it, and so I failed. I should have probably put some putty and put it on top of a cup or something, and so I wouldn't handle the figure as I painted it. I used a little bit of silver metallic color on the scales. I made sure to add a little bit of ink blot from the pen, and then I really took some time to make all these jars a different color. Thought that really did bring out a lot of the detail in this piece. In no way am I going to branch out to do tutorials on painting, but I do want y'all to see that with a little bit of time and effort, you can get a pretty awesome result that changes all aspects of your gameplay. The weapons rack. This one was a lot of fun to paint. Just imagining the different colors that these weapons could have. I put this one in like a sheath. I've added gold and brown throughout. A good guy shield from the kingdom and a bad guy shield right here, giving it a lot of character. Here's my cupboard. I did my best to just add a couple different colors for the wood throughout, just to make it look like it was built from excess wood laying around the forest. I did add this intricate detail in all of the bookshelves and above the fireplace, just to try to tie together all the pieces of furniture. I didn't want each piece to feel like it was a separate piece. I wanted my furniture to feel all connected in some way, using the same colors throughout. And I felt like I really got a great effect by doing so. Last but not least is my favorite piece, which is the fireplace. I really like the original fireplace, the brick being almost yellow. I really set out to make it very similar to the original. So adding brown on the bottom here and brown up top in the hearth. I did add this intricate design throughout the bookshelves and the cupboard, just to kind of give it some unifying color, which was this green and kind of a gold color within the leaflet here. I did try my best to add a little glow on the insides on each of the statues. So from one direction you'll see no color, and then from the inside direction you see a bit of the color here. But as you can tell, I have mistakes all over here. You can see some of the brown kind of peeled off on this side before I got to painting it. I added a lot of the moss throughout the back, so that in the room next door to the fireplace you kind of see this cool brick wall. And then my favorite aspect is this painting. I originally set out to print the exact portrait of the king, and my printer was down. And so it then forced me to do my best to spend a little bit of extra time to paint in the king's head. It was a great decision to do. It just took me a little bit of mental convincing to bust out my smallest brush and go ahead and try to recreate that painting. But I felt like it was way worth it in the end. I love how people online have added pictures of their cats and dogs or even their HeroQuest crew within that painting. But I thought it was neat to paint the original painting. I'm really proud of this piece. And last but not least, I had purchased some 3D printed trap tiles a couple months back. And I thought, this is just more dungeon dressing that I figured I should paint while I had everything out. So I set out to recreate the same color scheme of the rest of the furniture. This one right here I'm going to use as a gas trap when I get to my video on Skaven and how I've added a bunch of Skaven to my advanced HeroQuest gameplay utilizing Uncharted Dungeons. Check that video out, link in the description below. This is also going to be used as a possible spell that the Skaven can use. I have a little acid pool, the tripwire, there's like a bear trap, and then this I use as a spear trap, and then I have a dart trap. So when I play HeroQuest, if there is any type of trap being used or someone trips on or gets hit with a spear, I like to put these down. Just adds a bit more thematic gameplay. Something I think is worth building upon in the dungeon. All in all, I'm really proud of myself. I felt like I got a good result this first time. I'm super excited about starting on the elven furniture next, which I plan to do over Christmas break. I would like to encourage anyone who hasn't decided to branch out into the painting aspect of this hobby to go ahead and do it. I was so nervous about ruining my set initially, and I realized you can paint it again. It's not the end of the world, but I do feel like it adds so much to your gameplay. And I know some of y'all in the comments below will say coloring the figures will add even more. For those of you who are experienced, I would love to hear your feedback in the comments below. What I learned throughout the process of just posting my progress on Reddit is that highlighting is your friend. Just don't use a white, use a brown, use a gray. I also learned that using a really nice wash at the end really did help bring out all the detail. Being unexperienced with paints, I did realize after watching a few more videos on figures that I most likely will then move over to using speed paints. There's a really good result that you can get quick and easy with speed painting, and that the Vallejo paints just maybe aren't capable of performing in that way. For now, I feel like my set of 18 was just perfect for me to get started without a super high dollar investment. Well, that's all I have for y'all today. Stay tuned as I've planned out my next few videos, one of which is going to be a video all on Skaven and how I've incorporated a bunch of 3D printed Skaven into my advanced HeroQuest gameplay. And another one where I'm going to talk about dungeon events, what Zargon can do in between heroes' turns when there's no monsters on the board. Like always, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Share the channel out for new people to follow. It does help with the algorithms and pushing out my content to new potential followers. United the heroes stand, divided they fall. Come, let the quest begin.